I'm going to start with a little bit of background. So as a child, I had a happy childhood. I was born to my parents who were married, and I had two brothers, an older brother and a younger brother. Memories looking back, I just had a happy childhood. I had a vivid imagination. I was a dreamer. I believed that I could fly when I was young, and I kept trying. My family, we never wanted for anything. We were very well off financially. We had everything that we could possibly have wanted. My parents were not Christians. My mother would go to take us all as a family to church at Christmas time only. And the reason we would go would be because it was a social thing, and my mum was very sociable. It was also that we would be seen to do the right thing. It was a good deed. We would take presents at Christmas to the church, and my mum told me that we were taking presents for the orphans. I never met these orphans. I don't know who they were, but that's what my mum always told me. My dad was a Freemason. Again, something that I didn't really understand. I would hear all I knew that was that my dad had this kind of secret club, and he would go, and they had a funny handshake, and it was just a men's thing. If I ever asked my dad what he believed in, he would only say to me that he believed in a higher being. But I remember my mum telling me that if anything happened to her and my dad, that it was going to be okay because the Masons would take care of me, which actually seemed like a really scary thing for me, because I was like, what, this bunch of old men that are going to take me in? I was like, that doesn't sound very, very assuring. My primary school, we would have school assemblies, and occasionally I remembered something with a religious theme running through it, but it never had any impact on my life. At Christmas time, we would do the nativity play, and every year I would audition, and every year I wanted to be an angel or I wanted to be Mary, and I never got any of the big parts in the nativity. They would tell me every year, oh, you come dressed in green or red, and you can be a piece of holly or you can be a berry, and that was it. In my early childhood, I had an older lady who I called my Auntie Pat, but she wasn't my auntie. And I have a memory of her putting her hand on my hand one day, and she just said to me, Fenella, I promise you that God is real. That stayed with me for a long time. I wasn't sure about her religious background, because I knew that she would hop from church to church, and depending on which one suited her. So I remember there was a discussion that she wanted to do the lottery, so she decided to go to a Catholic church that week, so she could confess being able to do the lottery. So it was all a bit confusing. When I was 12, I moved to my secondary school. My parents put me in a private all-girls school, and I remember the first day walking in very, very nervous, and there were some girls there that were super confident, and they had just been performing in their drama. They'd just been performing Joseph in the Technicolor Coat, and they were all singing the songs. Some of them were playing the piano very, very well. And I remember walking in on my first day, and I was thinking, I just want to be like you. I want to be popular. I want to be talented. I want to know how to play the piano. I want to be the pretty one. I want to have friends. During my time at my secondary school, we were taught very much that we were to be independent young ladies, and that when we left school, we didn't need a man in our life. We were to do as well as we could in our exams, get as many qualifications as we could, and we were to go after a career. And it was very focused on being an independent woman. At the age of 16, so I had just finished my O-levels, and at the age of 16, my father decided that we were going to move abroad. My father, he had some ill health, and he became ill because he was working so hard to keep us living in this life that we had become accustomed to. He came home one day and he said to my mum, "I'm not living like this anymore." He said, "I'm making myself ill." He said, "I'm working so hard to keep you in this monstrous house." And he said to my mum, "You love the house more than you love me." And he said, "And the kids just want stuff, you know, Fenella has a pony and I'm paying for the private schools." And he said, "This is all wrong. You're all putting focus on the material things and not the relationships." And he said, we seem to be trying to keep up with the Joneses, but I don't even know who the Joneses are, so why I'm trying to impress people, I really don't know. So my dad said, "Let's get up and go, let's move to Australia." And my mum was like, no, we've not even been to Australia, like on holiday, so there's no way we're moving to Australia. So my father said, "Okay, we'll move somewhere in Europe and see if we like it." So we had been on holiday to Portugal, so my father said, "Let's move to Portugal." So at age 16, we moved as a family to Portugal. I was extremely unsettled moving there. I didn't speak Portuguese, I didn't have any friends, I couldn't get a job, I couldn't drive. And the few friends that I did find out there, they led me in directions that were not any good for me. I realized that I had led, up until that point, I had led a very sheltered life, and I was suddenly being exposed to alcohol and drugs, and I was really miserable. So after a year in Portugal, I asked my parents if I could come back to the UK. So at the age of 17, I moved back to the UK. I moved in with my grandmother, and I went to college and studied. I studied in tourism because I had my family living overseas, and it seemed the right choice. I stayed in England for quite a few years, and so we're now getting into my 20s. I still had no Christian influences, no reason for me to be looking in church. So in my 20s, I took a job in the UK, and I was working as an estate agent. And one day I had a client, and she was a Greek girl, Greek Cypriot girl, and I took her to see some properties. And then when we'd finished doing the tour, and she got out of my car, and she turned around and she said to me, "Do you go to church?" And I said, "No." And I was thinking, what a weird thing. Who says that to people? Like, do I look like I go to church? For me, the idea of church, my only perception of church was that it was full of old people that were waiting to die, basically, and they were just holding on to the idea of if there was a heaven, that maybe they would get there if they went to church. And I just thought it was for boring people that had no social life, and so they went there to find something to do, basically. So I was absolutely baffled why this girl was asking if I went to church. At the time, I felt like I was living the life. I had a great social life. I was very popular. I had everything that I wanted, and I was thinking, what a strange question. So I said no. The following year, I know I didn't think about the conversation again. Until the following year, and I woke up on Easter Sunday morning with this burning desire to know what was the point of my existence, and why was I here at all, and was there anything more than what you see every day. And so I thought, well, where do I go? Where do I go with all these questions? And then I remembered, I'll go to the church that girl said. It was King's Church. This is in Buckinghamshire. And I went to the church. It was a big church. There was about 400 people there, and I sat through the service, and I could not wait to get out. I felt like a complete fraud. I didn't understand it. I didn't know why people were there. and I felt very, very uncomfortable, and I just wanted to go home. I remember when I arrived at the church, I was so embarrassed that I was even at church that when I parked my car, I got out of my car and I ran to the church for fear of somebody seeing me, somebody that I thought was cool, and they were going to ask me, what were you doing in church? Anyway, so the service was over, and I was trying to make my fast getaway, as I never wanted to go there again. I didn't want to see anybody again. And before I knew it, I was stood in front of a reception desk, and I said to this lady, I've got all these questions, and I don't understand any of this, and what do I do? Where do I go from here? And the lady said, let me introduce you to somebody. She brought a lady up to me, and her name was Gaynor. And she said, you need to talk to Gaynor. Gaynor turned round to me and she said, do you know, you've come on the perfect day to church. She said, we're all having lunch back at my house today. And she said, and we're starting an Alpha course. And I thought, oh my goodness, I'm getting deeper and deeper into this hole, down this tunnel that I don't want to go down. And I was thinking, I don't want to go and have lunch with you. I don't know you, and I don't want. What is an Alpha course? I don't want to go on a course. I don't want to be studying anything. Anyway, I went to Gaynor's house. She gave me a lovely lunch, and we sat down and we started watching the videos. And afterwards, I was quite rude. All the other people were new believers, and I turned around and I remember saying to them, you are so arrogant. What makes you think that you've got this great value, that you were created and you have a God that gives you this value? And I said, you're no better than cockroaches or ants. And I was like, stop elevating yourself to this position. So I remember just being infuriated by it. I did continue to go to some of the Alpha courses, and I occasionally went to church, but I didn't really know why I was doing it. And then one night I had a dream. Okay, I dreamt that I was on the beach, and it was a hot day, and Gaynor, the lady that did the Alpha course, Gaynor was on the beach with me, and she said, Fenella, let's run up the beach, let's climb on that rock, and have our photograph taken. So I said, sure. So we ran up the beach, we climb on this great big rock, and we stood on the rock, and then she shouts down to somebody on the beach, can you take the photo now of me, Fenella, and Jesus? And I'm stood there like, how weird was that? Anyway, at the time, I wasn't reading the Bible, the rock didn't have any significance to me whatsoever, so I was just like, that's weird. I get off the rock, and then we went into this tiny little house, and the contrast was bizarre, because so I walked there was a front door, and I walked into the tiniest little room. It had like a staircase going up from this room, and in the room it had blood red carpet, and it had a fireplace, and the fire was lit. And I was thinking, how weird is that? I've just come in from the sunshine outside, and now I've come into this tiny little room with a lit fire and a staircase going to I don't know where. And there was one window looking out. So I followed Gaynor into this room, and Gaynor went up to the window, and she's looking out towards the beach. And as she's looking out, I'm stood behind her at the bottom of the stairs, and I said, Gaynor, I said, it was really weird, you saying, let's have our photograph taken on the beach. I said, with me, Fenella, with me, you, and Jesus. And I said, because the thing is, it was only the two of us. As I said those words, and she still got her back to me looking out the window, as I said those words, Jesus stood on my shoulders. And I went down to my knees. I was pushed down to the floor. And it wasn't the feeling of a physical body. The only way that I can describe it is like when you go on a fair ride, and the centrifugal force holds you like to the wall. You know those rides where the floor goes down, and you're just held. You feel like a pressure but it's not a weight. That was what it felt like. And he had his feet on my shoulders. I couldn't see his face, but I knew who it was. And I was trying to say to Gaynor, turn around, he's here. And I just, nothing would come out of my mouth, absolutely nothing, I couldn't speak. And then I woke up, and I'm in my bed, and I'm absolutely soaked in my tears. And in that moment, I was like, I don't want to be here, I just want to be back with him. I just want to be in his presence. When the reality dawned on me that I was dreaming and that I was back in reality. Anyway, sometime after that, I moved back to Portugal. Because I'd studied in tourism, I started working in tourism, and I was having a very, very busy social life because I was out there with holiday makers, and I was partying all the time. And Jesus started to convict me of my lifestyle. He started convicting me that my social life was not right, that I wanted to be the center of attention all the time, that I was extremely vain. I put so much focus on my appearance. I would dress specifically for male attention, and then my social life, my partying life started to go down the toilet, basically. I got involved with sex outside of marriage, with drinking alcohol and drugs. I was totally miserable on the inside, but this was my life, and people looking outside in probably thought I was having a whale of a time, but I wasn't. I was leading a double life as well, because I was going to church at the same time, and it felt horrible. Because I was going to church, and I was leading this double life, so to the people in church, they thought that I was a Christian. I then felt like, well, I have to do what Christians do when I'm with Christians. And so I decided that it was time for me to get baptized. I know now that all my motives were wrong at the time. But yeah, as I was saying, I did it because I thought that's what a Christian did. But deep down inside, I desperately wanted to be washed clean. And I knew that I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it myself. I got baptized in the Atlantic in Portugal, and as I was getting baptized, a storm came over and black clouds, and it was raining and the waves were crashing around me, so I almost got baptized just on entering the water. And I remember looking back and thinking, is this a picture of what my journey, my Christian walk, is going to be like? At that time, so I was going to church, and a new pastor took over the church. The pastor was from Calvary Chapel. He attended Calvary Chapel Applegate, which is John Corson's church. And he had also gone to Bible college in Austria. So this young chap comes over to our church in Portugal, Calvary Chapel of the Algarve. And for the first time in my life, I saw somebody who was living a life of faith, and he was demonstrating his faith through his actions. And I had never seen that in anybody. And for the first time, he looked at me in such a different way to the way that the men of the world were looking at me. And I saw Jesus in him, and I was drawn in. I started to attend his Bible study, and I started to read the Word myself. This is the first time I started to read the Bible myself. And I remember reading Deuteronomy, and when I finished, I was absolutely blown away. And I remember saying, it's all true, it's all true. During that time, I had another dream. I had a dream that I was on a trapeze and I was holding on to the trapeze and I was swinging back and forth and back and forth. And God was saying to me, Jesus was saying to me, Fenella, you can trust me. You can trust me. You can let go. You can let go. I've written here, at that time, Proverbs 3, 5 and 6 is what comes to mind. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your path straight. And I just remember swinging and swinging and swinging, and I was like, but God, this is everything I know. This is my life up until this point. This is what's familiar to me. This is what I've always trusted in. It's so scary to let go. But that's what Jesus started again with the process of sanctification. He started to change me. So the first thing that changed is that I stopped dating. I stopped this crazy social life that I had, thinking that I was going to find a man for myself. I was going to find a man that wasn't a believer, and I was going to convert him, and it was easy, and no need to worry, God. I was going to sort that. But no, I stopped dating. I also had a complete change of career because I knew that if I continued working in hospitality, I was going to struggle to break those ties of the social life. So I stopped working with people and I started working with dogs. I ran doggy daycare and I became a dog psychologist, a doggy shrink, and I ran agility classes and obedience lessons for dogs. During the time that I was doing that job, because I had become less sociable, I guess, and I wasn't going out the way that I was before, I was a little bit lonely. And so I decided to get a computer, and I made a phone call to a computer company to come and set my computer up. And the person that answered the phone was my husband, who I didn't know at the time. Who was not a believer at the time, and so through God guiding me, I was able to share my faith with my husband at the time, and then he came to the Lord. So we went on to get married. My husband already had a child, and so I became a wife and a stepmother on the same day to a beautiful little girl, but a little girl who wasn't looking for a mother because she already had a mother. So that relationship was difficult. Then the Lord brought Samuel into our life. Samuel is a testimony in himself, so I don't have time to share all the things that led up to Samuel. But I wanted to share that through all the trials that I have had in my life, whether through our marriage, through motherhood to Elise, and motherhood to Samuel, he has only used those things to draw me closer to him. First, Jesus turned my doubts and unbelief into the woman of faith that I am today. He stripped away my attachment to material goods in the world through obedience, through tithing and submission of my finances, only just recently in my marriage. He broke the chains of vanity that I had by having Samuel. Now I am blessed if I get 2 minutes alone in peace to use the toilet, let alone spending hours in front of the mirror making myself look presentable. I stopped being this independent woman by being so out of my depth in the trials of life that I recognized I could do nothing of myself. And the scripture that came to my mind is Philippians 4:18. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. My voice is going croaky. During my Christian walk, I have struggled with depression, with anxiety. I have had guilty, condemning thoughts. I've learnt to confess those thoughts so that the enemy loses his power. In the difficult times, I think of the words of Joseph that he said to his brothers in Genesis 50:20, "What you meant for evil, God has used for good." So for any of my struggles, I'm reminded that God will use them for good. Jesus has replaced all my dependence on the world with a dependence and a trust in him. My encouragement to you today is Luke 9:24. Whoever desires to save his life will lose it. Whoever loses his life for my sake will save it. My journey, although not easy at times, has been the most exciting adventure that I could ever have imagined. So I wanted to say to you today, if you are swinging on that trapeze back and forth, being tossed around by the trials of this life, just let go. I promise you, he will catch you. He's already done it. Thank you.